Okay, we're going to another episode of On the Wrist from Off the Cuff. To have a really cool review for you, a bit of a sneak preview from the brand Traska. A little about them. They are headquartered in Jacksonville Beach, Florida. They were founded by John Mack, and he really set out with the intention of making a watch that you could wear without worrying about a true tool watch fit for any activity. And this fits right within that genre, being an everyday watch. Some key common characteristics in design language to really look out for when you're wanting something that you can wear every day. You're just going to be wanting that versatile blend of sporty and dressy attributes kind of as a baseline. In terms of the model line, this is their Commuter, which has been out for a little while now, but this is actually a new size option, one of two in a total of three. Originally came out in the 36, is now going to be available in the 38 and also a 34 millimeter variation. This is the 38 in the Arctic white dial. And a little bit about the Commuter line. They are just an unapologetically understated yet striking in appearance type of watch. The Commuter is an all-around sports watch designed to be the perfect companion for any occasion. You can actually get these for $635 direct. That does include shipping. And these will be being released December 3rd of 2023, depending on when you're watching this. So I'm really excited about this particular release. It's a size I've been waiting for. I've always been kind of fond of this particular styling for this model line. I've reviewed quite a few other Traskas, whether it be their Summiteer or their Freediver, all very, very nice models. But with all that said, let's go ahead, zoom the camera out, get this piece in hand, and take a closer look. Okay, guys, check this out. So very balanced, of course, very symmetrical and very clean. So that does add to the versatility, especially within this white enamel dial, which is just beautifully glossy, as you can see, and very readable thanks to that nice sapphire crystal with, of course, an under AR coating. But to get into some of the dimensions, in terms of the actual measurements, is going to be 38.5 millimeters across, with a 10.6 millimeter thickness, and that is including that box dome crystal, guys, which does sit quite proud of that bezel. It is only 45.7 millimeters lug to lug, made out of full 316L stainless steel, and it does have that scratch resistant hard coating, which has been added on in terms of, you know, on top of the steel, which actually adds another 1,000 hardness Vickers onto the scale there, which is very beautifully brushed and finely polished in terms of those finishes there. Check that out. Look at that little chamfer around the bezel. Look at the nice transition on the bevel there that comes down on these lugs. Very, very precise and very well executed. Also, something you'll notice is that although this is coated, it's still quite bright in terms of the shade and the tonality on that steel, which is very nice. And I will say that Traska has definitely been doing their due diligence to continually improve on their finishing and even down to the hardness coating, which in some of their very early models added just a slightly noticeably darker tint to the metal. Here you can see it still looks bright like stainless steel, which is very, very nice. One thing to note is that 316L stainless steel is normally around 200 hardness Vickers. So with this additional coating on the outside, guys, that takes it up to 1200. So very, very nice. And I even have done scratch testing videos and stuff like that in the past. I definitely trust this finish very, very much. Now, in terms of that crystal, like I mentioned, it is beautifully done sapphire. It is actually box double domed, so you can see that even at a very harsh angle, it's going to still be quite readable and legible. You're only going to have that distortion at the very, very edges of that box dome there. And I think that's fitting. So it's going to be very legible, but you are still going to get a bit of that flare, a bit of that play with the light there, which is very, very nice and a whole lot of fun, and just adds an extra dimension to, you know, a relatively flat watch when you think about, you know, how balanced everything is. So and that's also within balance in that even though this dial is white, it also is beautifully deep, glossy enamel finish to it as well, which is really nice. And you also get, of course, those nice tall indices which are applied and beautifully filled with lume. So there's a lot going on here, even though I know some of you are just looking at this, seeing it as a very, very simple watch, which is probably what you should see, because I think that is the desired outcome here. It's something that's unoffensive, something that isn't going to overwhelm or overpower the rest of your body. When you have this on your wrist, it's just going to flow and complement everything really, really nicely. So getting down to, one thing to mention about that bezel is that it has this nice radial sunburst finish there right above that high polished bevel, which again, it just adds that extra layer of dimension there. They could have easily gone for, fully high gloss or something like that in terms of the polishing, but I do like that they have that. Again, it just adds to that nice contrast coming off of that glossy dial. And then we flip this over. Oh, actually forgot to mention the crown, beautifully signed there, very intricate detailing, and it does have the Traska logo, screw down crown, so that 100 meters of water resistance is definitely, a very confidence inspiring one. And you can see that it doesn't add any thickness by trying to have a display back. They did a solid case back. That does cover up the nice automatic Miota 9039 movement, which is a no date specific movement. So there's going to be no ghost crown position there, which a lot of people will enjoy. It's a bit of a pet peeve, and I don't think it's really a deal breaker for anyone these days, but it is definitely a very nice, nice to have. Not necessarily a necessity, but it just shows that extra level of thoughtfulness, which I can appreciate. You can also see that it does have drilled lugs on the side of the high polished case, which does make it easier for strap changes if you so desire to put this on a strap, which I think this will actually look really great on a strap. But man, one of the things that they really execute well is this beautifully articulated and fully articulated 3-link bracelet. You can see even the end link here, the fitment, the flow, that little extra bit of detail, how it's raised in the center section versus just being 2 carved lines. There's that 3D dimensionality to that, which I can really appreciate. And it flows just wonderfully into these nice short links that are, again, fully articulated. This isn't 3 links that are stuck together and then it is all screw in, and very nice. And they even added half links, as you can see here, which is a new feature. So half links plus you now have a 4-position micro adjust there, which is toolless. You see there's a little sign that says push. You push on it, and I'll push it from this side, and then you pull out. And then you can ratchet it, so you can push it in, and you just can't pull out. You do have to press the button again. And when you pull it all the way out, one of the nice features is that it's not an eyesore. It just flows quite nicely. And you can see now that there's a little, again, a little half link action right here, which is nicely hidden underneath the clasp. And the clasp is just short of the folding mechanism there. So it doesn't, give you any problems or anything like that in terms of that length. And I can appreciate that. I know some people might want more than 4 positions of micro adjust, but I appreciate that they didn't expose the internal mechanism too much when fully extended, because I think that can be just a little bit of just a lack of refinement on some other class watches we've seen. And again, it's all very admirable, and a lot of folks are still improving these designs, but something like that, it just shows a little bit of thoughtfulness in terms of the finished product. And you can see beautifully finished on this top side, nicely brushed, high polished chamfers, nicely milled triggers there for those buttons. You got a little perlage on the milled folding section. This is all very, very nice. It does have a little taper down to about 16 millimeters there, down from 20. And this is good, man. I really dig this. You get BGW9 lume. You're getting this glossy white dial, which is fantastic. And again, it's an enamel style of dial. So very, very well done and executed. And then you do have brushed hands with polished bevels, which is very, very impressive as well in terms of it really just playing beautifully off of those nice bold applied indices. So with all that said, let's actually get this piece on the wrist and see how it wears. Okay guys, as you can see on my 7.5-inch wrist, this wears really well. Check out that thin profile. It just sits beautifully, just flows with the wrist, especially with those rounded case sides, high polished. You can also notice that this does have great drape in terms of that bracelet. Very nice. Of course, if I do get my wrist a bit too close to the camera, you're going to get a bit of perspective distortion. So what I'll do is keep my wrist nice and low and then just tighten up the shot here so you guys can still get a more detailed look at the watch without getting such a skewed there we go. Without getting anything skewed in terms of the perspective, you can see very nicely centered on my wrist. And some of you might feel like it maybe is a touch large. Well, good news for you is it's available in 36. And if you still think that is too large, then you can also get it in a 34, which I think, again, they're offering you guys a lot of options. They don't have to. This is a small brand. It's one of those things where, of course, us as enthusiasts, we always are going to be probably the loudest voices in the room with any product or any niche in any market. But let me tell you, at the end of the day, I just think that's very admirable, and that, hey, if people want it, people request it, they're willing to produce it and give you guys some options, even though it might take away possibly from, some of their other models. And this one, I mean, you guys have seen a couple of Traskas. This is actually the first Commuter I've had on the channel, and that's because I felt like the 36 was just a hair too small for my wrist, and I don't have a super wide wrist. Even though it's 7.5 inches around, you can see it's a relatively round wrist there, so it's not like it's flat and super wide. So for me, this is just a great sweet spot. I mean, this is fantastic. Of course, it is really well spaced, so that dial is breathing beautifully. So it's not going to be crowded or anything like that. But for me, again, this is just a sweet spot in sizing. And I'm sure for somebody with the same size wrist, you might find it a little large. You might find it a little small. I will say that if you think that this is a small watch, or it might be too small for your larger wrist, I would argue that it wears really well, especially considering that more expansive dial. It's just going to give you a nice amount of wrist presence as well. So even for folks with wrists larger than mine, I would say don't give up on this piece. And chances are you will actually find, even though maybe it might feel small, maybe compared to the scale of your entire body versus just a floating wrist and a wrist shot, when you're looking down at your wrist, you will be totally fine with the way that it looks. I mean, this is just, again, so handsome, so well balanced, beautifully symmetrical. It just has so many of those things that we look for, and the things that we kind of pick apart on other types of watches. You can kind of see it all here, and it all just comes together in a very nice, cohesive way. So with that said, let's go ahead and get this piece off the wrist, set up for some loom shots, low light transition, and closing thoughts. Okay, let's go ahead and hit the lights here. Yes, as you can see, beautifully done. You do have that great reference point in terms of the dual indices at 12. So it's going to be very, very legible. You got quick orientation in the dark, and you can even see that that glossy white dial even does soak up a bit of the ambient lighting in the room right now. But one thing I always like to work in, of course, is a bit of low light transition, because you're not always going to be out in the middle of a field enjoying direct sunlight. A lot of times you're going to find yourself coming in and out of buildings, walking underneath overhangs, or just hanging out underneath the shade of a tree. So it is nice to see what these colors, textures, and finishes render like in less than optimal lighting. So maybe even include a little bit of harsh lighting, guys. That could typically expose any types of production defects, but all you're going to see here is just a beautifully uniform glide of the light over those nicely brushed surfaces that are also protected in terms of that high grade of brushing. So that's a very nice feature here. You do have very nice brushing that is going to be, of course, protected, as well as that high polish, which is not going to be as prone to picking up little hairline scratches that you might find on other uncoated, untreated steel surfaces. So very, very nice. And you guys can see that dial, my goodness, that thing just provides so much contrast. It's such a great palette there, because even in partial lighting, it's rendering white, and that's not something you always get. A lot of times, when you get into kind of the space of watch collecting, there's a lot of watch dials that are visually white, but they're actually more of, let's say, an opaline silver, and that does add a nice dimension a lot of the times, but you don't necessarily have that same level of just stark contrast you get with a truly white dial. And that's it. I mean, this is a pure white dial. It's not creamy, it's not silvery. It is just very nice, very clean, and that's something that I think a lot of folks do look for and hope for. It's not, there's nothing against some of those other watches. I have actually quite a few of them with an a pale opaline silver dial, some with texture, some without textures. And I will tell you, there's something about this white enamel glossy dial that it's just very different, and it stands out in a really beautiful way that still feels quite premium. So guys, closing thoughts on the wrist, really perfect proportions, very comfortable, very balanced wear. That hard coating is, again, much less noticeable visually than in previous generations. The dial spacing does offer more wrist presence for larger wrists, so if you have been intimidated or thought that the 36 was too small and you're still thinking, hey, 38 might be too small, I just urge you guys, give this one a chance, because it wears really well, even again on my larger wrist. Now, in terms of model variants, it's also going to be available in a woodland green, a mint green, a carbon black, or the Arctic white as shown. And you're going to be able to get this in a 34 millimeter diameter or 36 millimeter diameters. And of course, some of those dial finishes and variations will vary based on the size. One thing I will say is that some of these, depending on the colorway, might not be enamel dials, and might not be finished this way. There's also some sunray options, so definitely keep an eye out. This will actually be going live December 3rd, and you guys know, if you guys are a fan of Traska or just micro brands in general, that a lot of the times, if you miss the drop, unfortunately you might miss your chance. So I did want to do my part to kind of get this video out, post it for you guys, let it marinate, figure out if you like it, if it's something you've been waiting for, to hopefully give you that little extra bit of willpower come release day to go ahead and check it out, check the availability, find the combination that you're looking for, hopefully. And I just feel like this is such a great piece that would really fit well in really, in any collection, including my own. So in terms of comparable models, while many brands have focused on explorer-like alternatives, even to include Traska, which they have their beautiful Summit tier, I think it's great to see some more kind of slightly dressier, more versatile, I'd say Oyster Perpetual alternatives to become more available. This definitely gives me a lot of the same vibes that I love from my $1,700 Monte Noble for less than half the price, close to even a third of the price, really. And like my Monte Noble is probably one of my favorite watches that I own. And this gives me a lot of that for not as much money. I'm not saying that this, in terms of, even the comparables and the components and everything, but in terms of the wear experience, it gives you a lot, and that bridges a lot of gap. And I mean, that's one of the reasons why I think the Monte Noble is so great, because it bridges a lot of it gives you a lot of what you get from, let's say, a 39 millimeter opaline white Oyster Perpetual, for a fraction of that cost. And this kind of does that again in a very a kind of similar vein. So I just think that that's cool, and I can appreciate that. And I know so many people who watch this channel are going to be looking out for deals for that value proposition. So how could I not mention that? So bottom line for me, there's a huge market for perfect everyday watch, and I think the Commuter really delivers a truly competitive option for well under $1,000. Its complexity complex enough to be appreciated by enthusiasts and non-aficionados alike, which I think is cool, but never to the point of feeling overstyled or overdone, right? So it has these fine details, but they're not overpowering, they're not gimmicky, they're not just complex for the sake of complexity. There's definitely a fine line of refinement that's there. So while being subtle enough to maintain maximum versatility with clean and a clean and classic aesthetic, this is just a nice one. And again, it's not going to overpower your wrist, which I think overall is something that is a little underappreciated, I would say, in kind of today's collecting zeitgeist. But let me know what you all think in the comments below. If you like the video, please do hit like. And if you haven't already, please do subscribe for more content just like this. Thanks, guys.